Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third online class for NDE subject. We were discussing Unit 5 of our syllabus. The unit heading is Infrared and Thermal Testing. Till now, we discussed about basics and history of infrared thermography. Then we discussed characteristics of infrared waves. We also discussed about heat and temperature as well, and the modes of heat transfer, that is your conduction, convection and radiation, how it happens. All those things we have discussed in our previous classes. We further discussed about emissivity. This was also discussed the other day in your HT class, if at all I remember properly. And then we also discussed a very important long answer question, which was types of thermographic inspections. In thermography, or your infrared thermography, is basically divided into two categories, active and passive, and further active is classified into optical and mechanical. Your optical is further classified into pulsed and lock-in, whereas your mechanical is further segregated as vibrothermography, which further is classified into burst and lock-in thermography. So in the previous class we have completed all of these things. Today we are going to start our discussion with heat sensitive paints. You might have already experienced these if you have seen mugs which turn or change colors upon heating. It is a very simple technology. On YouTube there are a number of videos which teach us how to make a heat sensitive paint. So if you are interested, you may search for them and give it a try. Coming back, in industrial thermography, we require heat sensitive paints because in many industrial applications, parts will fail if at all they are subjected to elevated temperatures. The cause of these temperatures can be numerous depending upon the application. So it becomes important for us to monitor the maximum temperature that a part is being subjected to. For this purpose, different thermal sensitive coatings, paints, stickers, etc. will be used. We will be discussing about all of them, and the first one of them that we will be studying today is heat sensitive paint. Everybody, I hope you are having slide number 64 on your screen. I have already shared the PPT with everyone. You can refer to it whenever you want to, and the video links, if at all you are not able to see the video here, please do not worry. I have given you the video links wherever videos have been added to the PPT. So you can simply visit that link and have a look at the video while you are revising this course. Okay, let me start with heat sensitive paint, slide number 64. In systems operating at high temperature and in harsh environment, it is crucial to be able to determine the maximum temperature to which the components are exposed. I hope it is very much evident. It is self-explanatory. Nothing tough is here. So wherever something tough is there, or wherever I feel that my inputs are required, I'll be giving those inputs. Okay. Thermal history paints or heat sensitive paints are currently the main solution for thermal mapping of hotspots on components in systems where standard methods for measuring temperature, such as thermocouples or IR thermography, are not suitable due to their intrusiveness and or the difficulty to access the area of interest during operations. So what exactly happens is that in very huge machinery, if at all we want to do specific temperature test on a specific component, there might be some intrusiveness, that is this component might be intruding into other components, or it might be difficult to access the area so that we can directly test it. In such scenarios, heat sensitive paints are the saving grace. They will be helping us a lot in such cases. Thermal paints are simply applied on the surface prior to the test on the system under known conditions. That is, normal temperature, we will be applying the thermal paint. And the maximum temperature at which the component was exposed is later derived from the offline characterization of some physical properties of the coating. In most cases, color changes. That means, if at all we want to put this in a very simple manner, what we'll do is we'll apply the thermal paint under the known conditions, that is ordinary temperature, and then we'll leave the component for functioning, and after certain functionality is done, we'll again test it. Okay, we'll again test it, and mostly the color of the paint will be changing. Okay, and whenever the changes, we can identify that this has been subjected to certain amount of heat. Okay, we'll see how this is done. So there is a small video over here. We'll try to have a look at the video first. So you can see in this video that it is subjected to hot air. The component which is already painted with the heat sensitive paint, it is subjected to hot air, and the orange color is changing to yellow color. So that is how it functions. I'm going to go to the next slide, slide number 66. A variety of these paints are available, okay, like phase change paints or your multi-component paints, liquid crystals, or your temperature sensitive paints. I'll just explain about all these things. Phase change paints, these are nothing but simple paints which constitute of wax. So upon application of these on a component, we can clearly identify an isotherm line upon plotting the solid and liquid phases on a graph. It is quite easy to do that because wax either stays in the solid state, or when it is subjected to heat, it moves on to the or it changes into your liquid state. And we can draw an isotherm very easily, and plotting that we can identify the different phases. Other second category or second type is multi-component paint. This is an irreversible thing, okay, and previous also first one, phase change paints are also irreversible type of paints. So what happens in your multi-component paint? The name itself explains it. It consists of different components, each of which undergo a color change at a specific temperature. So different components will undergo different color changes at different temperatures. For example, maybe at 90 degrees centigrade, the paint will turn orange, and maybe at 150 degrees centigrade, it will turn red, etc., etc. This is just an example I have given you. So that is what happens with your multi-component paint. Next one is your liquid crystals. Liquid crystals are reversible color change paints. Reversible, that means you can have the reverse of it, and these can be produced with a coating. Simple coating of liquid crystal will give this sort of reversible color change. We'll be studying about liquid crystals in the coming slide, which is somewhat important, so I'll not discuss much about it here. And fourth one is TSP, or temperature sensitive paint. These are similar to your pressure sensitive paints and emit light whose intensity decreases with temperature. So I'll just read through. Phase change paints whose basic component is a wax. An isotherm is identified by the line of separation between the solid and liquid phases. With these paints, it is only possible to identify areas of the body that are at temperatures below or above the melting temperature of the wax. This is one limitation, obviously, because wax is the main component or basic component of these things. The coating can be used only once. That is quite evident. Multi-component paint. Each component undergoes a color change at a specific temperature, and hence each isotherm is identified by a line of separation between two different colors. In the areas between the two isotherms, it can be said that the temperature is between the two values. The color change is irreversible, so the coating can be used only once. Nothing difficult here. I hope everybody is understanding. A reversible color change can be produced with the coating of liquid crystals. Temperature changes alter the molecular structure of these crystals, causing a change in the wavelength and then in the color of the scattered light. Liquid crystals are quite important, I told you, LCD display, liquid crystals. You have already studied about these things in your CAD/CAM subject, but here we will be studying how they are used in your thermal side or thermography side. Temperature sensitive paints are fluorescent elements. Whenever fluorescence comes into picture, please take it for granted that phosphorus will be involved in that. You have studied this again in your CAD/CAM. Okay. Analogous to the pressure sensitive paints, which stimulated by an appropriate radiation, emit light whose intensity decreases with temperature. This is about your temperature sensitive paints. All these are various types of paints which are available, which are going to respond to thermal, that is heat. Next slide, I am going to slide number 67. There is a small video here about thermochromic plates. Let us have a look at that video. I'm going to the next slide. Liquid crystals are a state of matter which has properties between those of your conventional liquids and those of solid crystals. Rather than explaining more about this, I want to show a video about liquid crystals. Please listen to this very carefully.
Most of us were taught that there are generally three phases of matter: solids, liquids, and gases. But did you know that there are also intermediate phases called liquid crystals? At certain temperatures, some materials become liquid crystalline, which means they tend to flow like a liquid, but have some of the optical properties of a solid due to the ordered arrangement of their molecules. Liquid crystals can be found both in the natural world and in technological applications. First discovered in 1888, we now know of several liquid crystalline phases, each with unique characteristics and applications. Lyotropic liquid crystalline phases are found in living systems such as proteins and cell membranes. Thermotropic phases occur in a certain temperature range. The three most common types are cholesteric, smectic, and pneumatic. Cholesteric liquid crystals reflect different wavelengths of light based on their pitch and are used for mood rings, thermometers, and some displays. Smectic liquid crystal molecules form layers, much like soap. And pneumatic liquid crystals can be aligned by an electric field, which makes them very useful in modern liquid crystal displays on cell phones, calculators, portable computers, and flat-screen televisions. So as you can see, liquid crystals are almost everywhere. Our research...
Liquid crystals are highly anisotropic fluids. That means they are having different properties in different directions that exist between the boundaries of the solid phase and the conventional isotropic liquid phase. Okay, I'm going to the next slide. Slide number 69. As the color change is reversible and repeatable, they can be calibrated accurately with proper care and used as temperature indicators. So this is about your liquid crystals that we are discussing. As the color change is reversible in these things and it is a repeatable process, they can be calibrated accurately with proper care and used as temperature indicators. They can be painted on a surface or suspended in a fluid and used to indicate visibly the temperature distribution. So they can be painted on the surface as well as they can be suspended in a fluid and are used to indicate the temperature distribution. They can process acute thermal sensitivity. Sorry, they can possess acute thermal sensitivity, detecting temperature changes as small as 0.2 degrees Fahrenheit, and are available between temperature range of minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit to 248 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. Next slide. One more small video is there. We'll have a look at this video. Okay, we'll go to the next slide, slide number 71. So till now we have discussed about heat sensitive paints, and then we discussed about phase change paints, multiple component paints, temperature sensitive paints, and also liquid crystals. There are some other sensitive coatings also which we need to discuss. We'll do it a bit quickly because there are a number of slides we need to cover, and I'm in a hurry to complete this session today. So other sensitive coatings, first one is chemical indicators. Towards the right hand top of your screen you can see an image, touch only when green, and it is also written as hot when black. That means this sort of sticker, this can be sticked onto a place or onto a component which is then subjected to heat. It can be clearly understood that when the component is cooler, the color of the sticker will be green, and when the component gets heated or the temperature rises up, this green color converts into black. So such things or such labels or such indicators are known as chemical indicators. These are also pretty widely used. Okay, we'll go to the written part of it. Whatever is written, we'll just read through. Chemical indicators are typically irreversible temperature indicators. That means they can only be used single time, once. These one-time use products undergo a phase change when they reach their rated temperature. Suppose this is rated, the rated temperature of this sticker is around 90 degrees centigrade. So whenever the component reaches 90 degrees centigrade, then the color change will be happening. Chemical indicators are primarily used for temperature monitoring, providing evidence of attained temperature. That means we can know whether a required temperature is attained or not. That is only what we can obtain from your chemical indicators. Supplied as an adhesive strip or label, they indicate whether temperature falls below or exceeds a rated temperature. I just told you these are supplied as your adhesive strip or labels, as you can see towards the right of your right top of your slide. They indicate whether temperature falls below or exceeds a rated temperature. Okay, next slide. Something known as leucodyes. Leucodye is a dye that has molecules which have two forms, one of which is colorless. That means the molecules exhibit two colors. That is, one is colorless, and then as they are subjected to heat, they will be changing the color. They will be becoming or turning into some sort of color. We'll read through. Leucodye is a robust dye that contains molecules that exhibit two forms, one of which is colorless. They undergo reversible color change that occurs over a temperature differential of approximately 5 degrees Fahrenheit. So whenever there is a temperature differential, they undergo a reversible color change. That means they can be used further once more. Available in several different forms. They are available in slurry form, powder form, as a paint they are also available. They are also available in water-based ink, epoxy, or a master batch. I think most of you might not be knowing master batch. Master batch is a solid or liquid additive for plastic, which is used for coloring plastics. So we're using a master batch only, you're going to give coloring to your plastic. Leucodyes are engineered to change color over a broad range of temperatures from 24 to 154 degrees centigrade and are also available in several different colors. Next slide, slide number 73. Permanent color change paint. It's permanent, so it is only for a single time use. And just by having a look at the diagram, there are different colors: aqua, brown, charcoal, cyan, DK blue, gold, green, magenta, orange, pink, plum, purple, red, rose, turquoise, yellow. These are different color samples. Okay, so what might be this, or what might be this permanent color change paint? Heat responsive, irreversible color change paint is used as a process and quality control indicator, providing visual evidence of attained high temperature. Very simple. You choose a temperature range, and according to the temperature range, you choose that stickers or that ink or that paint, and accordingly, whenever the temperature range is attained, it changes into that specific color. Applications include metal fabrication and annealing, surface temperature management, machine equipment, and operations. Color density increases as temperature increases and is available from 140 to 392 degrees Fahrenheit. There are one more classification of these other sensitive coatings, that is known as photochromic. Photochromic inks change color when exposed to ultraviolet light, usually from the sun or black light. These inks are effectively colorless indoors, that is, whenever they are under a shade, they will be colorless and turn into vibrant color outdoor. When brought back inside, these inks again become clear, that is, they again become colorless. The inks becomes intensely colored after only 15 seconds in direct sunshine and return to clear after about 5 minutes indoors. So just by taking them into the sun, within 15 seconds they will be changing into color 1, and after coming back into the shade, it will take some time, around 5 minutes, for them to get back to a colorless form. 16 standard plastic colors, including 16 standard plastisol colors, including process colors and powders, slurry and dye, are available. So these are also available in different forms, as a slurry, as powders, as dye. All these are available. These are photochromic sensitive coatings. So these are all these methods which we studied. All these not exactly methods. So these paints, phase change paints, multi-component paints, liquid crystals, temperature sensitive paints, leucodyes, chemical indicators, photochromic, all these, they are your contact thermographic inspection methods. That means these will be in actual contact with the object on which we are going to do the testing, or we are going to monitor the temperature. Whereas previously whatever you have studied, those are non-contact type of inspection methods. Okay. So in your syllabus they are classified separately and under different headings, categories, but I have given a separate classification. First I have told you about all your non-contact inspection methods, and all these come under your contact inspection methods. Next one, we are going to go to infrared detectors. These are your infrared detectors. You can see an IR camera there. This is your infrared detector. A thermal imaging camera consists of 5 components. First one is your optic system, which enables it to see. A detector which detects your infrared radiations. Amplifier which enhances the signal, and a signal processor which does it, or which processes the input signals into something which can be read, or a display which displays whatever is read or converted. Next slide, slide number 76. Small process chart is given for your working process of your IRT device. Towards the right, you can see there is an object, that is a human being. He is emitting infrared radiations, and these infrared radiations are captured by the display, and then further they are going to release a thermogram, that is your thermal image of the object is displayed. Towards the left, it's a flowchart. I'm going to read through the flowchart. It detects infrared emitted from an object. This is the basic functionality of your infrared device. It then transforms the amount of infrared energy into the temperature, and it displays as infrared images. That is finally what is the output that is generated. I'll just read through the working process. This will be quite similar to what we have seen in the previous slide. It is quite simple and evident, so I don't think I need to explain anything here. I'll just read through the working process. A special lens focuses the infrared light emitted by all of the objects in view. The focused light is scanned by infrared detector elements. The detector elements create a very detailed temperature pattern called a thermogram. The thermogram created by the detector elements is translated into electric impulses. The impulses are sent to a signal processing unit that translates the information from the elements into data for the display. These appear as various colors depending on the intensity of the infrared emission. The combination of all the impulses from all the elements creates the image. So this is generally what happens in your infrared device. Let us see some characteristics of this IR device and some types as well. The scan rate is around 30 times per second. So per second they generally scan around 30 times. They can sense temperatures ranging from minus 20 degrees centigrade up to 2000 degrees centigrade. So minus 20 to up to 2000. So small negative temperatures to higher temperatures, like 2000 degrees centigrade also can be easily sensed by your IR devices. They can normally detect changes in temperature of about 0.2 degrees centigrade. That means very small changes like your 0.2 degrees centigrade change also can be accurately identified by these devices. They are generally of two types. Uncooled type. While you were looking at videos previously in the previous class, while you are looking at videos of your pulse in and lock-in pulse thermography and lock-in thermography, There, the cameras in that video he was describing whether it is cooled or uncooled type of camera. So there is a variation between these two things, uncooled type and your cool type. So let us see what exactly is this. Your uncooled type of infrared detector or infrared camera contains a unit that operates at room temperature. So this uncooled type of your camera or your infrared detector is capable of operating at room temperature. It is completely quiet. It does not make any noise. It activates immediately and has a battery built right in. That means it has an inbuilt battery as well available with it. So why don't we use this uncooled type? Whenever we require high accuracy or high precision, high clarity, we go for cool type. And this is generally cryogenically cooled. Cryogenical or cryogenics is a field of science which deals with temperatures as low as minus 180 degrees centigrade. So you might have studied about your cryogenics in your MMS. I'm not going to go in depth into it. Cryogenically cooled infrared devices. These are more expensive, obviously, because they have extensive cooling. They are supposed to be cooled cryogenically and are more susceptible to damage from rugged use. They are sensitive. That is why they cannot be used very ruggedly. They have elements sealed inside a container that cools them to below 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees centigrade. These are incredible resolution cameras. They have very high resolution and sensitivity that result from cooling the elements. They are having high sensitivity and the images, thermal images obtained are absolutely very good or very of excellent quality or high quality. Going to the next slide. These are some examples. FLIR I60, this is one model, and FLIR T250, this is one more model. These are your various IR cameras. Slide number 80. There is a small video. We'll have a look at the video. This video depicts how your thermal imaging camera works.
How does thermal imaging work? Thermal imaging is used by firemen and law enforcement to save lives as a result of its ability to see through smoke and trace body heat. But how is it possible that thermal radiation can be used to detect heat? Well, let's doodle it out. A thermal imaging camera features a unique lens that allows infrared energy to pass through it. Then, the focused light hits a sensor that scans the information and draws from several thousand points in the field of view. Through this process, an intricate temperature pattern known as a thermogram is created, which only requires 1/30th of a second to develop. The thermogram then transforms into electric impulses, which are directed to a signal processing unit that translates the information into data for the visual. The created image displays as various colors that correlate to the amount of infrared energy emitted. It is this combination of elements that generate the image that emergency professionals rely on, not only to protect us, but them as well.
Slide number 81. So we have seen how the image is captured by your IR device. Let us see how the image is interpreted. Most thermal imagers produce a video output in which white indicates areas of maximum radiated energy and black indicates areas of lower radiation. So generally whenever your thermal imagers, they capture an image or a video, the output will be only in black and white. Your black indicates maximum radiated energy on your white indicates maximum radiated energy and your black indicates lower radiation. So these grayscale images contain maximum amount of information. However, if at all you are not a trained person or if at all you just have a look at these things, you might not be able to identify them properly. So therefore what we will be doing is that we will be using some artificial colorized patterns for these. These colorized patterns enable easier image interpretation to the untrained observer. That means anybody can just interpret the image by looking at it if at all it is a colored image. Additionally, by choosing the correct colorization palette, the image may be enhanced to show particular energy levels in detail. There are number of color palettes that are available, but we'll discuss a couple of them which are most frequently used. In slide number 82, we are going to discuss about iron bow palette. This color palette is known as iron bow palette. It is a good general use palette and is one of the most common among thermographers. So next slide 83, you can see an image which is colored using your iron bow palette. That image is towards the right. And a small description is also written at the left. I'll read it. A general purpose palette, that is your iron bow palette, is a general purpose palette that quickly identifies thermal anomalies. What is meant by anomaly? Anomaly means differences. That quickly identifies thermal anomalies and body heat. Iron bow uses color to show heat distribution and subtle details. How the heat is distributed on a body, that is shown by your iron bow palette, and also subtle details, that means very small minute details, are also properly identified. Hot objects are shown in lighter warm colors, while colder objects are dark cool colors. While your colder objects are dark cool colors. Next slide. This is one more type of palette which is known as your rainbow high contrast palette. Rainbow high contrast palette. This introduces more colors. The name itself says it's a rainbow high contrast palette. So it introduces more colors and is ideal and showing the maximum thermal contrast. It is very ideal for your showing maximum thermal contrast. In the next slide, we'll try to see the previous image that we have seen for your iron bow palette. When it is colored with your rainbow high contrast palette, what will happen? Let us see the result of it in slide number 85. So this is what happens when we use your rainbow high contrast palette. The same image, the previously which was captured or which was used or which was colored using iron bow palette, it is now colored with rainbow high contrast palette, and you can see the variation in the image. Small description is there, I'll read through it. Using different colors to display minute temperature differences, rainbow high contrast palette is best suited for scenes with minimal heat change. Focusing on an area with similar heat energy allows the rainbow high contrast to detect objects and slight temperature changes despite low contrast conditions. Okay. In the next slide, what we are going to do is that we are going to put those two images, that is your iron bow palette and your rainbow high contrast palette. You can see the comparison between these two things. The same image, how it is colored using your iron bow and how it is colored using your rainbow high contrast palette. The same camera, same resolution, same everything. Okay. So here you can see your iron bow is much more vibrant, like it is giving much more detail about your thermal changes, whereas your rainbow high contrast is giving much more contrast. The contrast is very high here. So whenever high contrast is required, you'll be going for your rainbow high contrast palette. And whenever you want to find out the subtle changes in your temperature, then you go for your iron bow. Next slide. These are some applications that are there. So let us go through these applications, each and every slide from now, around 10-11 practical applications I've got for you. So here in your first application or your first example, you can call these examples or your applications, we are doing a thermographic test on fuses. These are 3 different fuses, and obviously just by looking at the color coding you can identify that the left fuse is cooler when compared to your rightmost one, and your center one is the hottest of all. Also correspondingly, the color coding and the temperature coding is also given for easy identification of the things. So this yellow color, or the color of heat that is shown, that is around temperature of 75 to 76 degrees centigrade, whereas the other fuses are around 50 degrees centigrade. Next slide, slide number 88. So this is a electrical substation. If at all you capture the image with your ordinary camera, that will be looking like that. Whatever you are seeing at the left top portion of your screen, if at all you capture it using a ordinary camera, it will be looking like that. But if at all you capture the same object with a thermal camera, you will be seeing where the heat concentration is there. So you can see the hot connection in substation, and the temperatures are always visible towards the right of your image. I hope everybody is getting this thing. These things are quite simple. Next example, slide number 89. Thermography can also be used for finding out building moisture in roof, because moisture stuck in the roof due to seepage would be at a different temperature. Thereby, this can be easily identified using a thermal camera. That is what is happening here. The temperature difference from its surroundings will, with temperature difference from its surroundings, we can easily identify the moisture content in a building. Slide number 90. In slide number 90, you can see a refractory insulation which is worn out. Just by having a look towards the left, it's the ordinary photo that was clicked. You cannot identify what is wrong with this, but by using a thermal camera, and if at all you capture it, then you can easily identify with the variations of temperatures obtained. We can easily identify the hotspot where there is a problem. It can be easily identified. Next example. Here you see a furnace tubes and burners. Okay, the furnace tubes which are lying. What is the temperature of them? What is the maximum temperature? Which areas are comparatively at lower temperatures when compared to other areas which are at higher temperatures? All these can be easily identified from the image. Next one, image number 90. Slide number 92. Here you see a pressure vessel, and in this pressure vessel there is a leakage from a flange. That leakage, it can be identified by number of tests, but simultaneously number of tests like your penetrant test is a good test for identifying it, which we studied previously, but it can also be identified easily using your thermographic test. So without undergoing any difficulties of your penetration test, that is, the surface need not be cleaned, no processing needs to be done, no developer needs to be applied, just by clicking the image you can identify. That is one advantage with your thermographic tests. Just by clicking an image you can easily identify the leakage. As you can see, in comparison to your left and your right, you can see the leakage here in the flange. The red color one that is there, that is your leakage there. Okay. Next slide, slide number 93. What is this? This is a PCB, that is your printed circuit board. PCBs, I hope everybody knows about your PCBs. So what is happening here is that before they actually go for a mass production, they are just checking out the prototype, and then they are finding out that there are some areas in this design which get heated up if at all this same design is going for manufacturing. So what they will do is that they are going to redesign. Design verification shows need of redesign before production starts. So this is one very good thing that can be achieved using your thermographic test. Next slide, slide number 94. Not only for your industrial use, these can be used for your medical as well. Towards the left you can see the legs of a human being, and towards the right it's a horse. So in your legs, what exactly is happening, how the thermal concentration is there, that can be easily found out. And for your horse, which is towards the right, you can see that one of the legs is having some sort of defect. For that reason, it has heated up quite more in comparison to the other three legs. Next slide, slide number 95. This is one more example, and it indicates a fluid level in storage tanks. This is quite easily, without even looking into the tank, they can just by clicking an image of the tank from the outside, they can say the level of the fluid that is stored in the tank. This is quite easy to identify because obviously the fluid is at a different temperature and the tank surface will be at a different temperature. So this temperature difference always makes it easy for us, and this comes under your passive thermography. I hope you remember the passive thermography, where you need not excite the object. No external excitation is required. Just by clicking an image, you will be identifying the defect or whatever you want to identify from the picture. You can be identified. Next example, slide number 96. There is a diesel engine of a ship which is running improperly. So we need to find out what exactly is the variation or where exactly it is going wrong, and therefore we click a thermal image and we see that there is a temperature variation. At one point it is 82.1 degrees centigrade, at the other it is 92.3, and the other it is 94.4. That shows that something improper is going on with the diesel engine. So easily identified, whatever is the problem, that can be rectified just by identifying the problem first. One more example, there is a overheated motor bearing and it is heated over 80 degrees centigrade. You can see in the image the color coding, red color shows above 80 degrees centigrade. So ordinary image is shown towards the right. Just by looking at the ordinary image, you will not be able to identify where exactly the problem lies. So for identifying the problem, what you need to do, you'll have to open it. You need to do a lot of testing on all the components of it. But just by using a infrared thermographic test, just by clicking an image, you can directly identify where the problem is or what is wrong with the motor. This is for your field watering condition and forest fire detection. These are natural things. For natural things also you can use your infrared thermography. I hope this is self-evident, nothing can be needs to be explained here. Next we are going to one more slide. This is the moisture. There are two images here actually. One is moisture in the aircraft and second image shows moisture on the aircraft. That is, moisture which is inside is also seen, whereas moisture on the aircraft surface is also clearly seen just by clicking at it. Always it's quite easy to identify. I'm telling it number of times because this comes under your passive thermography. Wherever there is a difference in temperature between an object in comparison to its surroundings, that can be very easily identified and it comes under your passive thermography. This is an example of it. Next slide. This is a bearing and belt system. With infrared cameras, we can easily see where exactly the heat is concentrated. So towards the right, the normal image is there, which is taken from your ordinary camera, and towards the left, the thermal image is there. You can see the difference. Next slide, slide number 101. So two more topics are there in this unit. One topic is your thermomechanical behavior of properties. In your second year, while studying your MOS subject, you have studied mechanical properties of materials. You have studied many mechanical properties of materials. Here, because we are dealing with thermography, we tend to provide or we tend to cater or we tend to give significance to thermomechanical behavior of materials. That means how the materials behave under a certain temperature. I'll just reiterate. The behavior of real materials under thermal and mechanical loading is described by a set of physical characteristics. There are some special physical characteristics which are assigned. Based on these only, how a material behaves sorry, except specific, to be specific, how a material which is under mechanical loading that is subjected to thermal conditions is behaves can be found out. They are classified into four groups actually. These properties, these physical characteristics are classified into four groups. Let us see through these groups. In the first group, the properties that come under your first group are specific heat capacity, thermal conductivity, and melting point. Under group 2, elastic modulus, yield constants, viscosity, etc. All these come under your group 2. In your group 3, density, coefficient of thermal expansion, activation energy. All these three come under your group 3. Whereas in your group 4, fracture behavior of materials comes. So what happens here? We are going to go to the next slide, 102. Thermomechanical properties of materials are studied for the prediction of material behavior in a wide range of parameters characterizing their internal state. For example, temperature and deformations, and structure, for example, porosity and permeability. Changes of state parameters and structural characteristics of a material are caused by energy exchange and mechanical interaction of a material with environment. Thermomechanical properties of materials study is required for many practical applications like heat capacity, thermal conductivity, rheological properties, thermal expansion, strength. All these have to be studied for finding out the thermomechanical properties. Heat capacity and thermal conductivity are the main properties characterizing heat transfer in materials. So actually this topic, whatever topic is there that we discussed, thermomechanical behavior of materials, this topic in itself is a unit. If at all I want to go in depth, and if at all I want to explain each and every property or how it is going to affect the overall behavior of the material, then this itself will be a big unit. So what I am doing here is I am just giving you a very brief introduction about this thing, because what they have given is this only as a slight small heading in your syllabus. I'm not going in depth. I'm not even explaining all these things because these are some basics which I hope or I guess you guys can learn on your own. So I'm not going in depth. I'm just going very much on the periphery as far as this topic is concerned. If at all we go in depth, this itself is a very vast topic, and at this point of time it is not that much required or important as well. So next we are going to see one more topic, or the last topic we are going to come. This is your honeycomb and sandwich structures case studies. You can see in the image this type of structure is known as your honeycomb and sandwich structure. Why the name honeycomb? Because if at all you see how the honey bees lay their nest, they will be laying their nest in the form of a hexagonal structure. If at all you might have observed sometime, or you might not have observed, just go to Google and type honeycomb, and you will see that the structure will be in the form of hexagonal structure, and this hexagonal structure is sandwiched between two plates. And such honeycomb and sandwich structures, they have some excellent properties, and they are having wide variety of applications. In the next slide we will see a video why they are having huge strength. Slide number 104.
Welcome to Honeycomb Panels 101. Let's take a quick look at why and how honeycomb panels achieve their flexural strength and stiffness. Honeycomb panels are superior for structural applications because they resist a dynamic known as shear. To understand shear, let's use the example of playing cards. Normally there's no tension between the individual cards. Their surfaces slide or shear easily when we apply pressure. The top card is allowed to compress while the bottom card appears to expand. Eventually, the deck fails to stay together. If we laminate the cards together, however, they no longer slide. The top cards are in compression while the bottom cards are in tension. The middle of the deck doesn't do much work, yet the deck is stiff. I-beams function the same way, the flanges resisting compression and tension. You might say that honeycomb panels are very, very, very lightweight I-beams with laminated facings resisting shear and the core acting much like the center of the beam. Honeycomb panels offer exceptional strength to weight ratios. Strength increases exponentially with core thickness, yet the weight remains relatively unchanged. Try that with plywood. What's more, honeycomb is easily milled, routed, cut, edged, fastened, and bonded, making it the core of choice for something as straightforward as a folding table, exterior walls, bulkheads, and floors of vehicles, trailers, and boats, and load-bearing applications such as high-speed rail cars. In aviation, Nomax and aluminum honeycomb are milled to precise shapes to strengthen virtually every structural area of aircraft, from engine nacelles to ailerons and rudders, even the beverage cart. Yes, you'll find honeycomb hard at work all over the world. The only question is, what's your application? Contact Sales Engineer today.
So let us see the process of manufacturing of this honeycomb. Generally they are made of aluminum for your applications like your aerospace applications, and many applications generally they are having aluminum. So let us see the aluminum honeycomb manufacturing process, slide number 105. There is numbering given here. I'll just explain each numbering in the image what is happening here. In the first number 1, you are taking a aluminum roll of foil and it is shown. So it all starts with the aluminum roll of foil. In number 2 of the image, you can see it. There are some lines which are drawn. How and what these lines are? The foil is sent into a printer for adhesive lines to be printed. That means you are going to print some lines where you are going to use the adhesive. In image 3 or number 3 in the image, the foil is cut to size and stacked into piles. You are going to cut the foil as per the size, and then they are stacked in form of a pile. Number 4, they are heat pressed so that the adhesive will join the foils, forming a block of honeycomb. So adhesive is dropped on the printed lines, and these sheets are heat pressed here in your step number 4. Your step number 5, these honeycomb blocks are cut into slices depending upon the requirement. As per the requirement of the customer, they will be cutting them into the required size. And finally, in your slide image number 6, they are expanded, completing the manufacturing process. So the same step I'm just going to read through again. Aluminum honeycomb manufacturing begins life as a roll of foil. Second step, this foil is passed through a printer for adhesive lines to be printed. The third step, what is happening is, these lines are printed. After these lines are printed, the foil is cut to size and stacked into piles using stacking machine. Fourth point, these stacked sheets are pressed using a heated press to allow the adhesive to cure and bond the sheets of foil together to form a block of honeycomb. Fifth step, the block of honeycomb can be cut into slices. The thickness of these slices can be tailored to each customer's individual requirements. And finally, the honeycomb is expanded, which completes the manufacturing process. So this is how your aluminum honeycomb is manufactured. There is one more small video depicting the strength of your honeycomb. Just have a look at it. So this is what happens. You can see how it is taking the compressive stress. Okay. So there is a small case study which I want everybody to do here. So there is a small specimen towards your right, or towards the right of your screen. There is a specimen which is used in an experiment. This is an experiment that is conducted. I'm giving you a scenario. This is an experiment that is conducted. It consists of a NDT&E standard aluminum honeycomb core sandwich panel with a multi-layer graphite epoxy face sheet. The aluminum honeycomb core has 2 cell densities and contains 4 types of fabricated defects. There are 4 types of fabricated defects which are given into this. First one is your delaminations, second one is skin unbounds, third one is excessive adhesive, and fourth one is crushed core. So what we need to do is that we need to identify these defects using our testing methods. So this type of panel is commonly used in the aerospace industry for the calibration of NDT and E equipment. So our case study is we have tested this specimen using lock-in thermography as well as pulsed thermography. So in the next slide, that is slide number 109, you can see 4 images B, C, D and E. These are 4 phase grams at 0.1 Hz, 0.03 Hz, 0.02 Hz and 0.01 Hz, different frequencies, and these are obtained from your lock-in thermography. Next slide, slide number 110. We have 3 more images, F, G and H. These 3 are 3 more phase grams which are at 0.04, 0.03 and 0.02 Hz, which are obtained by your pulse thermography. So the case study here is that I want everybody to compare the results and write a comparative statement on which methodology is better in identifying the defects out of these 2 methods, that is your pulse thermography and your lock-in thermography, and why we can say that this type of test is better. So I've given you I'm going to go back once again. I've gone back to slide number 108. I've given you a specimen and I've given you the test results as well. I just want you to compare these 2 results and come out with your own report. Okay, so I hope everybody will be doing this small case study. Next, there are 2 videos which are to be seen, and with those 2 videos we are going to complete this unit. Just beauty of thermal imaging, I just wanted to show you this video so that you can understand what exactly is the beauty of thermal imaging. And there is one more video. I want to leave you guys with this video. These are just benefits of your thermography.
Be proactive instead of reactive. Discover potential problems and make changes or repairs before they become critical. As a maintenance professional, it's your job to keep everything up and running. Now there's a tool you can use that will make your job easier, faster, and safer. And it might even make you a hero. Thermography is the science of taking pictures of heat. It's a complicated technology, but Fluke has made it easier to use. You simply aim, focus, and take a snapshot of buildings or equipment that you'd like to inspect. But instead of seeing a visible light image of the object, like you would with a normal camera, you see a black and white or color image of the infrared energy or heat being radiated from an object. This infrared image shows areas that are too hot or too cold, which helps you pinpoint problems and make repairs before something goes wrong. Here's an example. If you were inspecting an electrical system, you could take thermographic pictures, IR images, of conductors, fuse boxes, switchgear, and connections. Hotspots in the IR image could potentially reveal unbalanced or excessive loads or show loose connections. Without thermal imaging, you may complete your inspection and assume the electrical system was working properly. With thermal imaging, you can now verify this. Here are a few more examples of where a thermal imager be proactive instead
I'll
of
leave it here. It's already late. So thank you everyone for bearing with me. In the next class, that is on Tuesday, we'll be starting off with your unit number